Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nicole Hennessy, Vice President of Music Biz, and welcome to our Common Ground webinar series, a takeover by Clio Music and G7 Entertainment Marketing, and for the Brand Summit 2020, Music for Good. This week, Music Biz has been busy. We've launched our President's Address. Our President, Portia Sabin, has been at the helm of Music Biz now for just a little over a year, and she delivered for us, virtually, of course, her first presidential address. That can be found at musicbiz.org. We've also this week hosted Onward and Upward, a series of digital platform workshops and keynote interviews. We have one more session this afternoon right after our brand summit. That's going to be an interview with Ryan Press from Warner Chappell Music. But during both the presidential address and Onward and Upward, we've talked a lot about pivoting and silver linings that have come out of this pandemic. And I really believe that the Music Biz Brand Summit is one of those pivots and one of those silver linings. I've been working since the beginning of 2020 with the teams at Clio Music and G7 Entertainment Marketing. And we had a pretty solid face-to-face event planned for everybody in Nashville in May. But as you all know, we did make it to Nashville in May. So, I want to thank Jessica Abel and Michael Kaufman for trusting Music Biz to take the Brand Summit virtual. Jessica and Michael have worked extremely hard to put together this amazing program for you. It not only spans today, but the next 3 Thursdays. As you can see from the slide here on the screen, we have a program on the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th as well. These sessions were programmed around the theme is Music for Good, and sessions will zero in on how innovation and fast action led to partnerships between artists, music companies, and brands during 2020. So before we get into our special program for today, let me welcome G7's Jessica Abel and Clio Music's Michael Kaufman to give you an update on what they've been doing at their respective companies, and then they're going to introduce some pretty special guests for us today. So Jessica and Michael, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Abel from G7 Entertainment Marketing. I lead our growth and development efforts. And as an agency working at the intersection of music and brands, these topics that we're going to cover throughout these next few sessions are critical to the work that we do for our clients. It's been really exciting putting together this great series of conversations that will take place over the next few weeks, and want to give a big thank you and shout out to Andrew Hampp for putting together today's session, and a big thank you as well to all the panelists who have agreed to participate and I know have a great conversation in store. So thank you again for joining us, and hope to see you back over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of Thursdays. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Well, thank you, Jessica. And I concur, kudos to the Music Biz team as well as to Andrew for helping put this together today. I am Michael Kaufman from the Clio Awards, where I spearhead our Clio Music and Clio Cannabis programs. We celebrate creativity and recognize work in advertising and marketing across many industries. We're really glad to be a part of these sessions. I just want to note a couple things so you're aware about the Clios. We do have an editorial website. If you want to really find inspiring content every day, you can go to Muse by Clio, musebycl.io. And a few quick notes about our programs. Our Clio Music program is open for entries across a range of mediums, both in music marketing and in the use of music in advertising. Our next deadline is in December 4th, and you can go to clios.com/music if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the mediums and the program. I also want to highlight that next week we have a really special conversation as well. This one is about partnerships between music and cannabis. Obviously, there's a lot of things happening in the cannabis industry right now. We have another artist next week, singer-songwriter Margot Price, who's going to have a conversation with Elizabeth Hogan, who's from Willie Nelson's company GCH, and moderated by Ricardo Baca, a journalist and thought leader in the space who has a fantastic agency called Grassland. So if you're interested in music and cannabis, definitely tune in next week. Also, if you're working with artists in cannabis or working with cannabis brands in any way, please check out our Clio Cannabis program, the Clio Cannabis Awards, at cliocannabisawards.com. The program is open for entries. The final deadline is tomorrow, so you might want to check it out today. But if you're interested, there's more information there. Also, as Jess said, we have some really fantastic stuff coming up in subsequent weeks. We're really focused on sharing success stories and ways that artists and brands and music companies are partnering together to really serve the community and support the community. And I think we have some special conversations ahead about supporting independent music venues as well as the live space. It is now, though, my pleasure to introduce our segment for today. I do want a quick shout out, even though the intros will come, to Ryan and Carol and Jeanette, Rachel and Nellie. We're really, really privileged to have this amazing group today to share what they're doing and the work that they're doing that, is just, I think, remarkable and impactful. And for all of us during these times, really being inspired by people that are serving others and serving the community, I think inspires us to do that as well. So our moderator for both these sessions today is Andrew Hampp. He's somebody that both Jessica and I have known for a long time and love him deeply. He's a brand partnership specialist, a content strategist. He's a journalist who's written for many great publications. He currently writes, I think, one of the must-read columns called Songs for Screens in Variety. He is also a founding court member of Do the Work, which is an organization dedicated to the advancement of inclusion for the LGBTQ community. We applaud him for all his efforts and thank him once again for putting together today's panel. And I'm excited to get started. So I'm going to pass it off to Andrew. Andrew, take it away. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both for that wonderful introduction, and thank you so much for hosting us. Really excited to spend the next hour and change speaking with our fantastic panelists about sync. Do we have Ryan here as well? There he is.
Hello, hello.
Hey. How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Hanging in there, all things considered.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Ryan, real quick before we dive in, I just want to share a quick housekeeping note to everyone who's joined us. If you have any questions toward the end of each of these sessions, feel free to drop any questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and we'll do our best to get to a couple of those questions at the end of each talk. Ryan, you need no introduction, but I'm going to attempt one anyway, just for our guests joining us. So Ryan Tedder, of course, is a 3-time Grammy-winning singer, songwriter, and producer. He is the frontman of One Republic, as well as the co-executive producer and mentor on NBC's Songland, which has aired its second season this summer. With One Republic, Ryan has achieved 3 top 10 hits on the Billboard Hot 100, including Counting Stars and Apologize with Timbaland, and another 6 in the top 40. And as a writer-producer, I'm sure you equally know his work as a writer and producer on hits for Beyonce, Adele, U2, the Jonas Brothers, Charlie Puth. I could keep going, but I want to get to the nuts and bolts of today's conversation. So Ryan, when you announced this panel to your followers this morning on Instagram, you talked about how sync certainly played a very pivotal role for you when you were getting your start as a singer-songwriter. So tell me about how sync first made an impact in your career. What was your first big break when it came to whether it was writing music for commercials or writing jingles? What
Yeah, so first of all, I'm going to try and turn you up because I'm not getting enough volume out of you guys, and I want to be able to make sure I can answer every question. There we go. Wow, much better. Okay. Yeah, so I moved to LA in 2003, and the money, I moved here on a credit card that maxed out. I ran out of money about 30 days after moving here. I went to Ralph's and just like maxed out my card on groceries and went to IKEA in Burbank and like got a mattress and like the basic necessities. And then like, boom, I ran out of money. And 2 weeks after that point, when I was literally like, I have no money. I don't come from money. I wasn't given like money from my parents for graduating. Hey, here's all this money we have. You can take it now and go live your life. I didn't get any of that. So about 2 weeks later, I get a check for $7,500 from a song I did with Bubba Sparks and Timbaland called She Tried that ended up in a movie called Without a Paddle. Mm-hmm. And that song got licensed for, whatever it was, 20-something thousand. And I took my share of it and I got this check for $7,500, which as a 21 or 22-year-old, $7,500. I was like, oh my God, I'm rich. Like I'm the wealthiest person I know. This is incredible. And that was the first inkling I had about songs as it pertains to film and TV. I've been very vocal with in countless interviews about the fact that, like, the beginning of my career, the first 3 years, the thing that paid for my wife's wedding ring, our honeymoon, our marriage, our life, my car, like everything it wasn't Apologize or Bleeding Love or Halo or any of the first early hits I had. It was all licensing for TV and film. It was all sync money. And the guy that produced my first demo, a guy named Charles Pollard, out of Culver City, he was a sync guy. He did huge campaigns for Toyota, Honda, Minolta, Canon, Target, you name it. And I didn't even know about that world. But I remember walking into a studio one time, and I'm working on pop records, and he has like a picture of a Honda CRV or whatever driving, through the snow, and he's just like sitting here scoring stuff. And it kind of like popped my brain. And then, but I didn't move to LA to get into that, but it became very much a key component of my existence. And my first real big break in that world came from Adam Shankman, movie director who, did Hairspray and What Men Want, and more recently, and he's been one of my long-term, really close friends. He brought me in with Buck Damon, the music supervisor, to do songs for Step Up, the film, the first Step Up, when Channing Tatum was just like a random high school graduate. And I ended up doing half the songs for that movie, and that changed my life. And there was a period of time before OneRepublic or anything else took off where I remember telling my wife, this is a lot of fun. And if all I do is songs for TV, for commercials, for film, I will be happy, because it means I get to make music. And to this day, that's been a huge component. OneRepublic we've been very lucky in that over the 13 years, we've been one of the most licensed acts in Sony ATV history. I've learned a lot about what it takes to nail a song for a campaign. We've done 3 or 4 global Jeep and Chrysler campaigns, and Fiat, and I have the current Valentino campaign with Elton John and Lady Gaga. It is Brent Kutzel, who's in my band, and I, back in March, right before this whole thing went crazy, we formed our own company called Sync House that focuses solely on, music for TV and film. And we started off with Top Gun, the upcoming Top Gun film, doing music for that, segueing into things for T-Mobile and for different companies. And I got to tell you, I just wrapped a thing for Hallmark for Christmas. I had more fun doing that session than like 80%, 90% of the other sessions that I do. So I very much am still a massive advocate for, I tell people on Songland all the time, you don't just have to write hits. If you want to make a living in music, you don't just have to write hit songs. There's a way to connect with people, in a broad sense that doesn't involve just being in the top 40. So anyway, I'm a massive, massive proponent, advocate, participator, fan of sync music.
Yeah, you, like you just said, you represent the full pipeline of all the different ways that sync can help you both make a living and make a cultural impact. So with the OneRepublic side of your sync success, like, what was the first early sync in your OneRepublic days where you thought, okay, this is an example of how sync can take us on to the next level?
The first sync we ever had as a group was a song called Too Easy. We were on Columbia Records at the time before we got dropped. I was being managed, I remember, by Bino and Missy Worth. And she called me, hey, I need you to clear the sync request, this TV show called Bones on, I don't even know what network it's been on for 20 years. I don't know how long. It's been on for probably 12 years. Excuse me. So Bones, that TV show, season 1, they used the entirety of one of our songs called Too Easy. And it's a very Jeff Buckley-esque style song. And I remember I was playing as a band. We were off of, is it Fairfax, playing Molly Malone's, the Irish bar pub thing.
Yeah.
And we had a residency there for a month. And I remember Shankman, funny enough, was in the audience. And I was so happy about that sync, because it was obviously a check that we got for, I don't know what it was, like, call it 10 grand or something. I needed that. very much. And I remember telling the audience, hey, if anybody here watches Bones, we have a song in Bones. And then my manager reprimanded me after the show. She's like, nobody cares about sync or license. They don't know. And I was like, and needless to say, we parted ways. But I was very proud of that moment. And that was our first licensing. That was our first sync. And then that changed that opened Pandora's box for OneRepublic for sync. And then I remember 3 years later, we had finally taken off. We were on our second album. Funny enough, Ricardo Baca did a big interview in Denver when he worked for the Denver Post regarding our second album. I've known Ricardo for years. And we had a song called Secrets that got licensed for, and now I'm spacing on what the movie, huge Disney film with Nicolas Cage and, what's it called? Had to do with like
National
sorcery.
Treasure?
No, not National Treasure. It had to do with like magic and sorcery and like.
Sorcerer's Apprentice. Yeah,
I think it was the Sorcerer's Apprentice, and we did a huge thing in New York City. They flew us out, and we did the red carpet, and it was just like, and they wrote us a massive check for this song, and I remember getting the call from my manager, Ron Lafitte, as I was pulling up to the sushi place in Denver with a bunch of friends and family. And he's like, hey, so this is a good way to end the week, but you know, Sorcerer's Apprentice just licensed your song for X amount of dollars. It was in the six figures. And I was so blown away that I walked in and I was like, guys, dinner and drinks on me. Let's celebrate. And that was the second, and we've had many pivotal moments with Stink, with Counting Stars and Good Life. You know, Good Life became the theme song for Disney theme parks for about 3 years. And then we have another song called Feel Again that was, I think, the most licensed song in the Sony ATV world for probably 4 or 5 years. Sandals Resort just kept extending the usage of it. I think they used it for like 5 or 6 years straight. So anyway, yeah, the one thing that I've learned about licensing for TV and film and in sync is, and this is what a lot of artists tell me when they're like, why don't you look back when I started the band in 2003, 2004, it was uncool if you're a band to license your music. It was like not cool. Like we used, I mean, this is old white guy stupid rules, but like we use like anything Tom York and Radiohead does, that's our bar of like what's acceptable, which is ludicrous. And I was like, no, I'm going to do as much of this as humanly possible. And honest to God, it's changed our lives. And now with my publishing company, one of my selling points when I sign new writers is whether you sign with us for 30, 50 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand, the first thing I'm going to do is go as hard as possible after licensing TV and film. I think it's the absolute best way to recoup a publishing deal. I just did it. New writer Marty Murrow, I locked him with Ellen DeGeneres' Game of Games, the theme song to Game of Games that premiered yesterday. That's me and one of my writers, and recouped his deal like that. And I think that it serves so many purposes from an artistic or creative standpoint. And frankly, in 2020, with 40 million songs being uploaded every single day to Spotify and TikTok and all this stuff, like it is so hard to cut through all that noise. And for me, I will take a like Chrysler campaign or Apple campaign or whatever fill in the blank movie or TV campaign 7 days of the week for driving eyes and culture towards a song that I've written. That's my absolute go-to vehicle. Because there's a lot of noise out there. So you got to figure out ways to cut through.
Absolutely. And it's especially important that you're paying it forward for the next generation of artists that you're working with, whether it's Songland or the folks who signed your publishing firm. So speaking of giving back, let's talk about the latest collaboration you did with your friend Olivier at Fiat Chrysler earlier this year for the FCA brand campaign that went on in the early weeks of quarantine. You guys had a song called Better Days, which was featured in that. Tell me about how that all came about. Was that a song that was 100% ready when the opportunity came about, or did you tweak it? What was the...
So this is one of the craziest stories, and having done a lot of TV and film, this is once in a, like, I can't think of another time where a song got licensed this much, this fast in my career, honestly. So I came back from playing an underplay tour in Europe. We were setting up for a One Republic World Tour, a new album, 100 different things, and all of that incinerated because of COVID. I flew back from London March 13th, right when Trump cut off like travel from Europe. That happened to be the day we were flying back, so we made it back.
Thank goodness.
We were finishing. We didn't know what coronavirus was. We didn't know if it was going to last 2 weeks or 2 years. But we assumed that by the summer, like as they say, when it gets hot, COVID doesn't like heat, whatever. So we're like, okay, well, we're gonna put our album out in a couple months anyway. Let's finish it. We had a song called Better Days. All we had was a chorus. Didn't have a verse, didn't have a melody. And I thought, right, well, I'm stuck in my studio for 2 weeks with Brent, the guy who I do all the licensing and TV stuff with. And I thought, okay, let's finish this. And day 3 of coronavirus, I'm listening to the chorus on Better Days, and I'm watching people die in droves in Italy and around the world, realizing how scary this disease is and can be. And all I can think about is what's happening. So I write Better Days from the perspective of being stuck in a pandemic. And I tried to write it in a way that didn't put too much of I didn't want to drop the pin too hard in a pandemic or coronavirus. The key to writing good licensing TV and film songs is make people infer what you're talking about, whether it's the car or the experience of the brand that you're aligning with. You want the listener to feel that brand, but you don't want to be describing that brand. You don't want to be talking about it. You cross that line. A lot of times people write for TV and film, they cross that invisible line. Same with movies and end titles, where all of a sudden, like, it's the equivalent of like you're trying to write the theme song for the Titanic, and the second line of the second verse is "and sinking like the Titanic." You know, like, and writers oftentimes you get too specific. Brands don't want that. They also don't want like super romantic songs. They don't translate that well for brands. So I wasn't writing this for a brand. I was writing this to just capture what I felt at that moment. And I posted it on Instagram, which I've never done. I've never posted One Republic, like, unreleased songs, but I had been working with Lil Nas X and he did it all the time. And so I was like, well, he does it and he's clearly figured out. So I posted a minute-long version of Better Days. 24 hours later, and the video went off on my Instagram and One Republic's Instagram. 24 hours later, I'll give you a 3-week time span. Olivier Francois reaches out to me 24 hours later via Instagram. Hey, what's this song? Can you call me? I think we want to use this we're going to switch out our whole campaign, but it has to be done in the next 48 hours and make this the song for Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge for the next 3 months for our whole campaign. Nobody's buying cars right now. Like, the economy was halting, but they'd already bought the ad space. We want to make this the theme song. So we scrambled to get it finished for Olivier, who's a good friend of mine. And we pull it off. And less than 7 days from the time I post it, I'm watching the Today Show, and up pops our commercial with Better Days playing in it. Yeah. Then Meredith R., the president of NBC, calls me and says, this Better Days song, we want to make this the theme song for NBC. We're going to use it across. We're going to put every single star from every show and do 60-minute like PSAs for NBC. We want to run it through summer. So then the next week, it's all over NBC. That week, the NFL calls and says, football's not going to happen. Everything's going sideways. We want to make Better Days our theme song for the NFL. 2 days after that, ESPN calls and says, we want to make Better Days the theme song for ESPN moving forward. And I'm leaving out 2 or 3 companies, but the song literally leapfrogged from like 1 company to 6 companies in about 4 weeks. And I've been doing this since 2003, like writing for whoever would pay me to write stuff. And I've never experienced anything turn around that fast. And again, it wasn't written for Chrysler or a brand, but I think that One Republic, my nature of how I approach songwriting, I'll write pop songs and like romantic songs for other groups and artists, with Ariana Grande or Maroon 5 or what have you. But for One Republic, for better or worse, our lyrics stylistically and themes are more about the human experience and the human condition. And so I think that's why our music has lent itself so well for licensing. And that's why people go after, I'm not comparing us to you too, but that's why you go after like bands like U2 and you know, and Coldplay, they get a lot of calls for licensing because the lyrics aren't aimed at one single person, you know, perspective. They're aimed at the world. They're aimed at more like life and perspective and living in the human experience. And I think that those types of lyrics just lend themselves better for sync.
Absolutely. Again, for all of you tuning in, if you're not taking notes on this masterclass on how to get synced, please start doing so. And Ryan, with Better Days, you guys had mentioned when you first started licensing the song and released it, that a portion of your proceeds would go toward COVID relief. Are there any organizations you guys have aligned with that you think are doing exceptional work?
Yes. Yeah. We immediately lined up with the Red Cross. I mean, that was our first kind of go-to. We had to pick an organization quickly. You'd be surprised how complicated it is to give money away. It's like licensing, you know, you were talking about musicians earlier. You're talking about musicians in the cannabis space. I own a CBD sparkling beverage. I'm wearing the hat. I'm not drinking it right now, but normally I am. And we aligned with Drop for Drop. So every can that we sell, we donate 12 ounces of clean drinking water. Mm-hmm. We build wells in India and Africa and things like that. It's like a 1-for-1 initiative. It took us 3 months to figure out legally how to give money away, like as a corporation. Fortunately, because of COVID and how insane the whole thing was, a lot of the normal rules and regulations and protocols of aligning with, 501c3 and charitable organizations, they were a lot more forgiving. So we immediately lined up with American Red Cross to start donating. And I believe we've raised, at this point, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars from streams of Better Days. We also had to, of course, convince our record label to give up some of their profits from that song. They've done it with us one other time, though. When we released Feel Again, the first single off Native back in 2013-14, that song went on. I mean, I think we've sold about maybe it's 5 times platinum, something like that. Mm-hmm. And we convinced the record label and everybody involved that at least up to $1 million we would donate to Children's Hospital, which we did, which was absolutely phenomenal. Oh, I'm sorry, not Children's Hospital, Save the Children. I'm thinking of too many organizations.
You even used the heartbeat, right? To write.
Yeah, I flew down to Guatemala and we were visiting these malnourished, underprivileged places, which is uncanny. They basically eat corn for 98% of their meals, which does not do a body good. It's like, even down to like, if you've been to certain parts of indigenous parts of Central America and you notice that they're a lot shorter and smaller, like the average person's 5'2". And I kept asking, why is everybody, they're like, they don't get nutrients. They get corn, and that's like it. And, I won't go down the dog leg on all of what that was, but it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And we recorded some heartbeats from some children down there, and that turned into the beat for Feel Again. And so I think that anytime that an artist or a company at this point, if you're launching a company in 2020, whatever it is, and you're not starting with a social give back component, you're not thinking, how can I give part of my net proceeds to, whatever organization you're lined up with, whether it's, if it's vaccine research and development, because of the time that we're in, and Lord knows we need that. If it's children, if it's cancer, I just think that the smart companies and smart organizations this day and age, you're doing the right thing. You're not just profit monsters, right? That's right. You're lining up with something that actually truly makes the world a better place. And I don't think that's cliche. I think that's just a noble pursuit. I think it's the right thing to do. So for Better Days, that was our alignment. We wanted to give back because, I mean, at that point, we're talking late March of this year, the absence of PPE, the lack of masks. I mean, all of a sudden, the world was in a tailspin. So yeah, we wanted to give as much as we could.
Absolutely, and thank you again, and thank you to Interscope for joining you in those efforts. So, Ryan, I have 2 more quick questions for you before I open up to our Q&A.
For sure.
Here's a fun one. I have a favorite sync of yours, and I'm curious to hear yours. My favorite, which is with a little tongue in cheek, but when Secrets was used in an episode of 30 Rock, when Tina Fey was doing her monologue. Yeah. Tina Fey is Liz Lemon. She did this meta monologue about how manipulative music cues can be as a storytelling device, and they're tricking you. And then Secrets kicks in, and they shoot each other dramatic glances. My favorite.
That
Also
actually,
on True Blood. That was a good
wow.
one.
You know what? I don't know if I can beat that. That might be one of my all-time favorites. I'm trying to think if there's any other sync. I did the theme song for a Dr. Pepper campaign back in the day. That was pretty awesome. That was a high point. That was a fun one. Nobody really knows that nobody even really knows that it was me singing. It was kind of a little trick.
Wow.
I'm trying to think. Yeah. You know what, man, that might actually, you and I might be aligned on that. That
Okay.
30 Rock. There was another one. I Lived got used as
The Glee finale, right?
Yeah, it got used as the Glee finale. Like the final episode of Glee, and I Lived became the entire tapestry of that, like that. It summed up, what obviously put Ryan Murphy on the map and revived, I think largely in part revived musicals, if I'm being honest. I think that I Lived being used at the end of Glee would be probably my favorite. But it's a close tie with 30 Rock.
Yeah, very, very different emotions in those two uses, but I like
very
that.
much. Very much.
All right, my last question is, well, first I want to just tee up all the songs you have out in the world at this moment. You just dropped the latest One Republic single, Wildlife, 2 weeks ago. You're a co-writer on the new Blackpink single with Cardi B, Bet You Wanna. You co-wrote and co-produced Alicia Keys' latest single, Love Looks Better, which she debuted at the NFL kickoff game last month. You co-wrote and co-produced the title track to John Legend's Bigger Love album, which he performed in his ABC primetime special this summer. One Republic has a single with Kygo called Lose Somebody that's already been streamed more than 169 million times on Spotify alone since its release early this year. And last but not least, as you mentioned, your song with Lady Gaga and Elton John, Sign From Above, is not only on her album Chromatica, it's the current theme to the new Valentino fragrance commercial. These, of course, were, I'm sure, all underway well before COVID, but I'm curious, in this moment we're in now, have you been able to maintain the same productivity?
I've been like, and I mean this with no hyperbole, and funny enough, not all of those, 2 of those songs came out of COVID.
Wow.
The Kygo song was recorded, finished, produced, and everything during COVID. This is April. My Cardi B, Blackpink, which is the next single, I believe, that was written and recorded in June during COVID. And I'm trying to think, the Gaga song was done a while ago. And then the John Legend song was finished during COVID, which became a Postmates campaign, funny enough. So I during this time period, I can say without any exaggeration, the way that I'm wired is I've always had an underdog mentality. I always have. I've always felt like the underdog as a writer, the underdog as a band. And if something goes, if bad times happen, I tend to overexert myself to like prove to myself, all right, this is a garbage year, but I'm gonna try to have the best year I've ever had, just to like truly make lemonade out of lemons. And so what COVID ended up doing for me, like my benefit, was now I'm not traveling 300,000 miles. So in a typical year, I will travel anywhere from 150 to 400,000 miles, just zinging around the earth, doing private concerts, doing tours, doing promo, doing all this stuff. I lose so much creative time and sleep and energy doing that traveling. That's not happening. So now I actually have, for the first time in my career since I was 23, I have the same amount of time that every other songwriter has. Like when I was over the power of the last 13 years, trying to get the singles on various different artists, Ellie Goulding or Ed Sheeran or Maroon 5, and I'm competing with the Max Martins of the world and like the Stargates and Benny and all my friends. I was always so jealous that they had 5 days a week, not on airplanes, to just work for 9 hours a day. I've never had that. So I was working in hotels and on airplanes and green rooms. And now I have that time. So I've really tried to make the most usage of it. I've written probably, and I'm not no exaggeration, probably 3 3, or if not even more, 3 to 4 times the amount of songs since COVID started that I had written in the previous 24 months. So writing these days is, I mean, starting the sync and licensing company, Sync House, which we are about to do a press release coming soon, which is basically you're getting for licensing TV and film. Our whole vision behind that, and that launched during COVID, was I'm going to start focusing on syncs and film more, because usually I would just do it kind of on the side. Now I'm going to be focused on it. And for a lot of these, they end up being One Republic songs. You know, we just wrapped Clifford the Big Red Dog. We did Clouds. Wildlife actually is the end title for Clouds, the Disney movie. So that's why we did it. It was for that film, written for that film specifically. And now I'm just really laser focused on it. I'm enjoying songwriting more now than I ever have. I'm back into producing a lot more and doing all the tracks and build out and music. And I'm trying to have as much fun as possible, because I too feel like Groundhog's Day. I mean, I have probably one day every 2 weeks where I'm just bummed and like kind of like quasi depressed. And just like everybody else, even if I'm having a good week, it doesn't matter how good the news is, I'll just call my manager or my wife and I'll be like, I'm just like so depressed today. You know, I just feel like, is any of it real? Are all these Zooms adding up to anything? Like, is it actually real? Even I had my first country #1 this year with Thomas Rhett and John Party, Beer Camp Fix. It was my first #1. So I've been, you know, I started in Nashville. I finally have my country #1. It's in June. And I remember the moment it hit #1, I get a text from Scott Borchetta and from Thomas Rhett. And all of a sudden I'm going like this. Yeah. And I look around my studio and I'm like, no one's here. And I can't go out and celebrate. And,
oh man.
And even, so I'm sure anybody watching, even like they can relate, even when you have a really good day during this weird year, you're kind of like, but how good is it? Like, how can I, you know what I mean? Like, should we pop, like, should we just, you know, have a drink, even though we're probably already drinking too much anyway? You know, it's just it's just weird. But I'll shut up and let you carry on to the Q&A. How I process bad times, I'm the type of driver, right? On the highway or what have you. If I see an accident coming or about to happen, I punch the gas and I drive through it. Yeah. I'm not the guy that slows down and takes a look at it. I'm like, to hell with that. I'm cutting through this. And so that's been my approach with COVID. Staying busy, staying creative keeps my mind off of the CNN sound bites or Fox News, or, I mean, they're all like, at this point, I don't believe any of them, but I'm trying to really stay focused on creating and block out as much bad as humanly possible. And staying busy has been my salvation during this time.
Absolutely. We gotta appreciate the silver linings while we have them. Okay, so I want to jump into the Q&A real quick. We have a question from Brittany Davis. This is a good one. She's basically asking, what ratio should songwriters keep in mind as they're starting to pitch for sync? How many songs should you have in your arsenal, you know, given the batting average when you're first starting out? Should you have, like, how many should you be writing or recording a month in your demo?
So just so you know, my philosophy and I came up with this. It's funny. I came up with this philosophy this year. My new approach to sync and film. I'll give you a little insider baseball pro tip. Your average director or like producer, but typically it's the director. If we're talking film, for instance, landing a song in a film, directors, they need to say no. They need to have the ability to say no. That's a big part of what they do. And there is a gap between music supervisors and advertising agencies and the director or the client. So you're serving a lot of cooks in this kitchen, right? You've got the company themselves and their CMO and whoever's below them. You have your advertising agency, right, who has designed the ad and they have their own creative ideas. And then you might have some music supervisor liaison. Yep. What I've found is historically there is a gap between the person that's communicating to you and what the actual client wants. And it's a bit of the telephone game. So for instance, let's say a campaign is going to go live in June of 2021. And in February, they start looking for the songs for this campaign. Between February and June, the director or whoever is really controlling the creative might have shifted their perspective or their opinion on what the right type of song is. Or there might be a new song that comes out culturally, and he goes, oh, I want it to sound more like Post Malone's Sunflower, right? Or whatever the vibe is. You need to stay as up to date as possible. If you have the ability to get the actual, if you're already in, this is maybe a little bit more beyond just beginners, but I'll get to that. If you've already established yourself somewhat as a writer for TV, licensing, film, really try to get the direct from the horse's mouth intel on what the director and the head of creative wants, because that gap between what the music supervisor tells you and what the director actually wants will cost you a lot of time and a lot of heartache. And I'm not going to name names, but there's a handful of huge films that I was a part of that I removed myself because I would spend a day, 2 days working on a song exactly to what this music supervisor wanted, only to find out the director had changed their mind. And it was just this massive waste of time. So if you're just getting going writing songs right now and you're a beginner for TV, licensing, film, commercials, you name it, my lucky number is 3. So for every spot, I will submit 3 songs. And why is that? Now, of those 3, almost all the time, I know the song they're going to pick because I know which one is the one. But you need to give them the ability to pass on 1 or 2. Right. You can almost, I'm not saying give them garbage songs, give them 3, right? But you kind of know which one's the one, but you need to give them the ability to say, I don't like that one. I don't like A, I don't like C, but man, B, I think that's the one. That just, I'm telling you, it puts the power back in their hands, and they don't feel like, well, this person just gave me one song and it's sink or swim with this. So that's a little thing that I kind of came up with. It's not like it's a genius idea, but I came up with that idea, that theory back in February when we went out for a project. And I remember calling Brent. I said, don't send the song in. Don't send it in. Send in, let's grab 2 other songs that we have kind of finished. Let's lump them in with the one we know is the winner, and let's see what happens. Yeah. We did that. And I'm telling you, like the next 4 licensing sync situations we landed ourselves in February, March, April, we got all 4 of them. And we did the same thing each time. And maybe it's luck, maybe it's not, but I think that that's a one little trick that I would employ. And avoid romantic boy, girl, girl, whatever. Avoid romantic lyrics unless it's a Hallmark ad asking for romantic lyrics. Avoid romantic lyrics. Think more universality, hooky, soccer stadium, aspirational lyrics. Not cheesy, but more aspirational lyrics and less romantic.
Okay, wow. Again, numerous masterclass bullet points to take away. One more quick question for you before we introduce the second half of this panel. We have Bobby in the Q&A who is from your hometown of Tulsa, and she's asking, which I think is very appropriate, do you still need to be based? Do you need to move to LA to get discovered? Can you be discovered from Tulsa in this age of the bedroom producer, right?
You can get discovered from Tulsa. Look, I'm trying to sign a songwriter right now. I partner with Murda Beats, big hip hop producer, who's a friend of mine, and we're trying to co-sign this producer right now who's 19 years old, and he's out of Prague, Czech Republic. We found him on the internet. Murda just signed a writer. I just wrote to a song with one of Murda's writers who is from Munich, who's living in Munich, Germany. So to answer Bobby's question, 2-part answer. I would say that, look, for the last 20 years, one of the first, any of the panels that I've done, I don't do a lot of them, but when I do them, back in the day when I was ASCAP and I would do the panel, I would have told you, like, my first word of advice when I remember somebody was like, hi, I'm from Utrecht, Holland, and I know that I have hit songs and I've written, hit songs that are better than what's on radio. How can I get into the music industry? This is in 2010, right? And I said, you're from Utrecht, where do you live? And she said, Utrecht. I still live in Utrecht. I said, nope, you need to get on a plane. You need to move to London, or you need to move to LA or New York, or Nashville. I've softened on my opinion on that only in the last year or two. I think COVID has actually accelerated the ability for artists and writers to get discovered and to find work not living in LA. Yeah. Prior to the last 2 or 3 years, I would have told you 100%, you need to get to LA, you need to get to New York. New York has sadly all but died as a music city in terms of the creative community. I have one songwriter signed, the Cautious Clay, that still lives in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And there are a couple that I know that still live there, but it's just not. I used to go on writing trips to New York all the time. I don't do that anymore. If I do that, it's to write with me or somebody, that flew there with me. New York is not a super creative place anymore. Unfortunately, it's seasonal. It will come back.
It will be. Yeah.
I would advise Tulsa. Yes, you can. Now more than ever, you can get discovered wherever you are. But I will say this. I would still say that if you want to do this as a full-time, you want to make a living writing songs for licensing, TV, film, sync, other artists, what have you, you would still be greatly increasing your odds if you did live in Los Angeles, Nashville, Miami, London. Those are the cities that still, you don't have to live there. I'm just saying that it would increase your odds because the creative community likes to see each other and collaborate. There is still a little bit of the out of sight, out of mind mentality to music supervisors. Specifically for films, music supervisors want to know that they can bring you in to come watch the movie, bring you in to watch the scene, come visit your studio. And if you're in Tallahassee or, in the middle of the country, you're not as accessible. But if it's great, it'll cut through. And I do think that it is possible to make a living in Tulsa, in anywhere else. And again, that's a very new concept. Only in the last couple of years, I think, has that been truly achievable.
Absolutely. All right, well, Ryan, we can't thank you enough for joining us and being so generous with your time and especially your insights. So for everyone who's joined, please join me in thanking Ryan for kicking us off.
Absolutely. By the way, go get your vote on.
That's right. I have my ballot right here. I cannot wait to fill it out and make a plan.
Awesome. All right, guys. Good luck. Write them songs.
See you, Ryan.
Sing
Thank
pretty.
you so much.
All right. See ya.
All right, I'm going to introduce the next half of this session. So we just heard the artist's perspective of how sync works and how to get your music heard, and we're about to hear from the other key seats at the table. We have a label, we have a publisher, we have an ad agency, as well as an in-house music supervisor for a brand that are going to help give us the rest of the perspective of how sync, and especially sync during COVID, it comes to life. So I'm going to introduce our next panelist. So we have Carol Dunn. Carol is the executive producer at Human Worldwide. Jeanette Perez, she is the chief experience officer at Cobalt Music. Nelly Rajabi, who is the global music supervisor at Google. And last but not least, Rachel Rauch. She is the director of advertisements and brand partnerships at Electra Music Group. So please join me in welcoming the second half of this session. Hi, ladies. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hi.
Hi.
So I think a good place to start is piggybacking on what Ryan just said about the game of telephone that can sometimes happen when a creative brief, gets shared with an artist, and how each of you and the role that you represent in bringing these campaigns to life can sometimes happen. I mean, Carol, from the ad agency perspective, was there anything that resonated with you about what Ryan was saying about the importance of staying on brief, but the flexibility for change sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a commercial music house. I speak directly to the producer at the agency. That producer at that agency is getting their brief, from the creative team at that agency, which they've worked with the brand directly. And it does change. It could go from, everybody wants that song, like Ryan was saying. Everybody wants that song that's from you know, an artist that is known. You can't always afford that song. So then you're doing a parallel path where it's an original piece of music. They may or may not have given you a reference, you know, and like this artist or like this song. And it is a delicate dance, you know, and it's, the more you have, the better your relationship is with that producer and or the creative. The editor who's cutting that spot plays a huge role in that as well, and they could also be pulling tracks. So it is a delicate dance of trying to figure out what it is that they really want, and also taking us being creative, my composers being creative, my music supervisor being creative, and offering options that may not have even come up in creative conversations with them.
Absolutely. I mean, Nellie, from your perspective at Google, what do you see as far as the journey that a brief can take from initial pitch to what ends up, you know, in the final product?
It can take a lot of twists and turns, but speaking from an in-house perspective, I think maybe we run a little bit differently in that because we're sitting in one location and because we're one team and because the music supervisor on the project, the film, whatever it may be, is seen as a creative director of sound, we really need to be aligned together as a team. It's not so much a game of telephone. I would push back on that idea, but it is this idea of flexibility, knowing that your strategic direction, your priorities for the campaign are going to change, but it is a music supervisor's job to be, you know, in line with your creative counterparts and making sure your recommendations are heard, and also you're listening to the rest of your team, because you're not the only person whose opinion matters on the project. But there definitely is something very valid around the idea that there needs to be flexibility and optionality is key. I always encourage when we're working with people, especially on custom work, to give, three to five options, especially when you're working on something larger. It's always going to work in your favor. Even as Ryan mentioned, if you do know the one, you may know the one, but you may not know which one will work on the allotted picture that we end up with. So that definitely helps, and there needs to be flexibility there. And also, I find it really valuable and rewarding to keep the briefing loose, especially when working with artists or custom music houses, and not giving specific, if there is a specific artist or track reference, to make sure that there are a few and to call out what feels especially special about those pieces, and calling out more the feeling and the unique qualities that you're after rather than the sound that's achieved via X, Y, and Z.
Right. Let's bring our rights holders on the panel into this discussion as well. I mean, Jeanette, from your perspective, how do you see the importance of, like Nellie just said, having options? I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of artists who are doing a lot of custom work on your behalf. So walk us through that part of the process.
I mean, you know, we have many different types of songwriters and artists on Cobalt and AWOL, and, you know, sync is a top priority for probably every single one of them. I think for artists nowadays, sync is just as important as radio from a promotional perspective, and sync is important from a financial perspective for our writers as well.
Yeah.
The process it can be an arduous process. Like when you're responding to a brief, you know, it's a little bit like playing a scratch-off game. You know, you are one of many who they're reaching out to, and your job is to ensure that you have a really strong relationship with the person who's on the other side, so that if you don't understand the brief, if you need more information, you can quickly pick up the phone and ask the right questions so that you're giving them what they want. If you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, or if you have artists or clients that are trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, Carol and Ellie are not going to come back to me. They're going to say, these people don't understand what I'm looking for. They, you know, can't really get behind the creative, so I'm going to go move on to somebody else. And really what you're trying to do when you're sitting in our shoes is give the creative on the other side what they want. So when we work with our songwriters and our artists, we need to be really clear with them that when they're writing a new song, that it's about what the client wants, not what is on their mind today.
Rachel, I saw you nodding vigorously. What's your advice for your artists with your electro roster to as far as a winning formula to get to the finish line?
You know, being on the label side and not a publisher, also being a frontline artist, you know, you need to respect the artist's creativity and what their vision is for their music, for their album. You know, to Jeanette's point, it's all about relationships. And if you don't send a good search to a supervisor, they're not going to keep coming to you. So it's always best to be transparent. And if you don't have anything that's really going to wow them, or maybe creatively be a different take that's interesting, it's just worth being transparent, saying, hey, this isn't, I don't have anything this time. That said, you know, being on the front line of a label, you want to get the single out, or you want to get something off the new album out so it gets eyes. You know, pretty much everybody on the panel now acknowledge that sync is a huge form of revenue, and it's the new A&R, just like, you know, radio was back in the day. People discover new music from advertisements and other brand opportunities. So it's important to keep your supervisors abreast of all of your new priorities and all the new music, and then just keep on maintaining that relationship and making sure they're getting all the music that's there so they can sync them.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys for helping us. I just wanted to pick up the thread that Ryan brought up as a good starting point for what I also want to touch on, which is, of course, the theme of music for good and Sync's role in that. Quick reminder for those of you who are still joining us, and thank you to the many of you who've still stuck around for this half. Please drop any questions you may have for our panelists toward the end of this discussion into the Q&A, not the chat feature. The Q&A button is to the bottom right of your screen. So let's get into the COVID of it all. How has everyone's day-to-day here changed over the last 6 months when it comes to music licensing? What, if anything, has changed given the way that we're all working in this new remote workforce? I mean, Carol, I'll start with you.
It was weird at first. Everything sort of got low and slow, and then it was, okay, you know what? As Ryan said, let's push through this. What are we going to do? And brands, we were finding, we're trying to figure out how to, we're still here, but we're thinking about you. We're still here. We're all in this together. I've actually enjoyed the themes and the emotion that's coming out of this, because it's anything to make people feel good, or make them feel happy, or make them feel like we are going to get past this. And I think that there's been a lot of it's not selling their product, it's selling the idea that we are here and we'll still be here and we're all doing this together. So, you know, there's been this, you know, the COVID music, the COVID piano, which is like, oh my God. So
are we out of that phase? Please tell me we are. Have we passed that?
I mean, I feel like it's funny because, yeah, I think, yeah, we're definitely moving out of that phase,
Okay.
But it's still this sort of, just the theme and the tone, and just trying to like be uplifting without being melancholy, you know, and, but yeah, I think it kind of was here, it's gone up, and I think we're leveling out. We're busier now, and I don't even feel like we're doing COVID spots anymore. You know,
Yeah.
we're back. We are busy, and it feels good, and we did it all together.
Absolutely. Yeah, Nelly, I mean, can you maybe picking up what Carol was talking about, how the tone has shifted as the months increase? How have you seen that develop through the work that you're doing with Google?
Well, the day-to-day hasn't changed per se, but the heart of the process is still the same, with just the additional nuances and challenges, which are the feelings that COVID has brought.
Yeah.
A lot of the larger brands have stepped in logistically and financially to help with COVID, and also social justice causes, which rightfully so, right? But Google is one of them and donated an aggregate amount of a ridiculously high amount. So from my perspective, the changes that I've seen outside of changing our tone, making sure what we're putting out is relevant to the world, and also for Google as a brand who's trying to be helpful, actually helpful.
Yep.
we, outside of that, have seen budget cuts, which isn't unique to any one production or brand, but it's sometimes surprising to hear it even from a larger one.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, we're now pitching more internally, having to be more deliberate and intentional and, concise with our messaging and our production. So if anything, the ideating process, the coming up with the ideas that I have fit within the overarching goals of our company and the marketing strategies, the ideas that the other creative counterparts of mine are coming up with and having to collaborate on. We have to think through more and be more thoughtful about them. So it's adding a lot of work behind the scenes, but it's also part of the fun. When COVID first happened, we had a lot of things that were tentatively supposed to air that we had to revisit. Some of them got killed. Other things we had to go back into a prototyping phase. And one of the spots I was working on, we went through 9 rounds of prototyping, and it took us an additional 4 months until we got something out, because we kept having to revisit and say, is this even worthwhile? Is this worth having people's eyeballs on it? Is it worth distracting them from their lives? And is it helpful? So that's been the majority of the change, has been how we ideate and also how we implement those ideas across the budgets that we've seen cut because of how involved the companies have been in, financial and logistics help.
Yeah. I know. Well, to your point, it's strange how much of a roll of the dice just a simple ad campaign is, given how quickly the climate changes these days. I mean, we're in the middle of an exceptionally crazy past week alone in terms of the overall news cycle. So things are changing constantly. So finding things that are going to resonate, 6 months from now, let alone 6 days, I think I'm sure is a big part of everyone's day to day. Rachel, I want to bring you back into this. So Ryan was talking about how he has a song called Better Days that kind of became this domino effect anthem for all these different networks and promos and brand campaigns, et cetera. Is there a song like that on your roster that since has become this unofficial anthem of the current times? Like what are the most popular licenses that you're working on?
Well, we have Dance Monkey, a little song called Dance Monkey by Tones and I, which was a little big last year and earlier part of this year. So that's been a huge sync-friendly song that gets a decent amount of syncs on our end. We have Fits in the Tantrums, All the Feels, the album that was put out last year, has so many songs that resonate with the time with, where we're currently at. So All the Feels, the actual title track of the album, has also had a bunch of syncs because it has that emotional gravitas where it's not hitting you over the head and it's not that typical piano. So it's just a little bit more interesting to our clients. And then Crowded Table by the Highwomen, it was another one that resonated, the whole we're in this together message. And we actually had a really nice sync with Campbell's on that one.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to that in a sec. Jeanette, what's the overall tone of the licenses your team is putting out right now? Have you seen a shift as far as overall mood or types of music that seem to be resonating the most?
Yeah, I mean, it evolved over the last 3 to 6 months, but at the beginning, it was a lot of songs about togetherness, and it was a lot of actually really recognizable songs. So songs like Go Your Own Way and Thank You for Being a Friend have been, constant during this time. But, in more recent months, we're seeing that shift a little bit to things that are, to Carol's point, a little bit more back to normal. So things that are more fun and celebratory and sort of getting back into the swing of things. And we have plenty of artists that are sort of writing those again. So one of the things that happened when we went into COVID, it was a lot of our writers said, what should I write about? What should we be anticipating? And we reached out to a lot of our partners to give people guidance, but it's evolved a ton since then. So, we got a ton of we're in this together type songs, and now we're getting a ton of we're back songs. So it's really trying to, anticipate what's coming next during these times, which, as you said, are changing by the second.
Absolutely. Well, to that point, we have some examples of recent work from each of our panelists that I want to at least attempt to show everyone, tech permitting, and tee up the stories behind how each of these came about. So Carol, we'll start with you. You've presented a spot that your team put together for Prius. Can you walk me through why you think this kind of speaks to not only the tone of the times, but certainly the increased need to support independent artists in particular through licensing right now?
This may not speak to the tone of the times,
Okay.
but it does speak to supporting independent artists. And this was an example of this band, Penny Engine, is one of our composers, Matt O'Malley, and his wife, Heather, and they've been together forever. And this band, and working on these tracks, or this project, I should say, for a long time. We were asked to present music for Prius, and it definitely was one of those briefs that, was kind of ever changing. It's sort of like, this is the tone, this is the brief, this is the direction. We presented original music, we presented popular music, but this track just fit the tone of the spot. It was great for us because it is actually a band on Human's label.
Mm-hmm.
And it just stuck. And what it does is, it brings more eyes to a band that may not necessarily have the eyes that they would get, if they were on a major label or on a label at all.
That's right. Excellent. Okay, well, I'm gonna pull that spot up right now. All right, we might have to come back to that one. All right, well, while I wait for that one to buffer, Nellie, you prepared a spot that just debuted just this past week in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. Do you want to tell us about that and the overall story behind it?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of good because Carol's coming from a different perspective, and I can't really speak to we are supporting independent artists. I'm a huge proponent of that, but this specific use was, it very quickly landed as something that felt right for the spot. It's a story that's meant to celebrate the modern Hispanic family as part of celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. So not quite an independent or developing artist, but I think speaking to the times and how people are trying to stay connected right now, it does that, and that was the goal of showing, especially within this culture, how beautiful it is that family is at the center of things, and being able to stay connected is still even more important. But very quickly landed on the beautiful Piel Canela, which is originally composed by Bobby Capo. He's a very legendary Puerto Rican singer-songwriter, and then the most well-known rendition is by Los Panchos and Ede Gourmet. And I knew immediately that we would need a modern voice to speak to today's families. And a few years ago, I had actually run across a bootleg cover that Kuko had put out, nowhere officially, but it was literally a minute long. And after a little while, it was really hard to find it. It was almost nowhere to be found. It was really simply done and just beautiful. And I also admire his voice as an experience as a Mexican-American artist. So Round Hill was really gracious in approving the use of a newer rendition. And then Omar Kuko and his A&R rep, Carlos Cancela at Interscope, and Dan Senna were phenomenal partners in making it happen. I reached out to them, and they originally didn't even know about the cover. So they're talking to Omar and trying to figure it out. And he had sadly lost the files because of an accident he was in. And so it worked out really well in that we were able to recreate it fairly fast to the specific vision of this spot and work together as a trio to do it. Or there were four of us, actually. My brain's not working. But yeah, it was really wonderful. Now it's out as a single officially and available for streaming. And I hope his fans enjoy it because it's a really beautiful piece, and I'm shocked he hadn't released it sooner.
Excellent. All right, I'm gonna pull that up.
La da 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 da, la da 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 da, la da da da. Okay, Google, play Piel Canela. Okay, Google, find me an arroz con leche recipe. Que como aquella de quedarme sin tu amor.
Okay, so Google's launch night event just went down and they announced a whole slew of new hardware, but I'm going to focus this video on the two most interesting.
Okay. Well, I always get emotional at that song. The Edie Gourmet version of that you mentioned, Nelly, was actually played at my husband's grandmother's funeral last year. So that is certainly resonates with me as wow, as a song that has a rich family history. But yeah, so thank you for sharing that. Carol, let's try round two real quick. I think I might have been able to figure out your video. Just give us a quick reminder of the spot you're about to show us.
It is for Prius. The band is Penny Engine. I also just someone had asked if you could enable the sound preference. So I don't know if people are hearing it, but someone asked that.
If you, I believe the answer to that is if you go to the top left of your screen on Zoom and select turn on original sound, that should improve your audio. I found that to be the best solution. Okay, so let's try this again. Awesome, it worked. So quick note on that, Carol, I see that spot probably 5 times a day. So I know I can only imagine how many eyeballs it's bringing to your band's music, as well as, of course, a nice royalty check every month. So kudos to you and your team. Okay, Jeanette, let's talk about the spot that you have prepared for us. This is with, I believe, one of the artists you represent, as well as a copyright, right?
We represent the copyright, not the artist, yeah. So this is a spot for Procter & Gamble that features Moses Sumney's Doomed. It was released in June, right after George Floyd's death. And really the spot speaks for itself, but it's just an awesome example about how brands are using their platform to make sure that we have real active dialogue about what's going on in the world today. And I think Procter & Gamble has done a really good job of this. They started with this spot, and then subsequently to that had 2 or 3 other spots that were, directly about this topic, and which have thus far, again, sparked a ton of dialogue just by running these commercials. So I'll let the commercial do the talking.
Okay.
Does fulfillment come? And I expelled from this mortal shell. We're at death the living love. Though you someone I can't see.
Okay, yeah. Again, a great example of how a powerful message and a powerful song together make an even better combination. Jeanette, thank you so much for sharing that. All right, Rachel, let's get to the example you've brought with us. Tell us a little bit how this one came about.
Yeah, so this one was in the early days of lockdown, probably within the first month and a half or so. And productions have been shut down. It was actually, I think we can all attest to this, how that was a little bit scary, especially for what we do, and no productions being in place, and finding creative ways to still make commercials, but not do it safely and effectively. And so this one came about from from the agency. It was actually shot by the agency's employees and family and friends of agency employees, and then color corrected in post. So it wasn't your typical found footage. It is just an interesting way to make a production in this time. And they needed the perfect soundtrack because there was no VO. And it was all about moments together with your family and everybody coming together from, you know, what's more all together now than chicken soup or tomato soup with a brand that everybody knows. So the song complemented it so well, and the band was thrilled with it, which was very, very exciting too. It's rare when you have that combination of all the events that need to happen in a pretty seamless way, again, in what we do. So yeah, that was the background on that one. Crowded Table by the Highwind.
Awesome. Let's watch it now.
You can hold my hand when you need to let go. I can be a mountain when you're feeling valley low. Yeah, I wanna have with a crowded table and a place I can find for everyone. Let us take on the world while we're young and able. And bring us back together when the day is done.
Wow. So as you said, that came out in the spring and the early days of quarantine, but I'm sure, Rachel, as the holidays are around the corner, you're probably going to get a couple more licensing requests for that one. That's certainly.
Hey, let's make it happen, Nelly.
Yeah. That's right.
Carol, looking at you.
Excellent. So 2 more quick questions for me before I jump in our Q&A. You know, we've touched on this broadly, but, you know, again, I guess, how has the role of music in creative storytelling shifted even more so? Is it even more front and center of briefs than it might have been pre-COVID? I mean, Nelly, is that something you've seen as far as just more of a starring role for music?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think we're still finding our footing in that regard. It hasn't shifted too much in one way or the other. Initially, it felt like it played a really integral role in that brands are very careful about speaking and what they're speaking about right now. And so to let something like music lead the way and speak feels like the most honest way to handle it. But I've seen it. I've seen the pendulum swing both directions, to be honest. Initially, it was leaning on the music to do the heavy lifting because it felt like the most genuine and honest way to communicate. And maybe also the least intimidating to be able to connect with other people. As a large brand, it's hard to feel like you do have a human connection with your audience. Maybe I would imagine. I mean, I'm speaking as someone who works at a brand. So I do feel the human qualities behind it because I'm seeing it put together, but hoping it translates. So initially, yeah, we were leaning on music to do the heavy lifting there. And I think I always push to do that, but the pendulum swings both ways still.
Yeah. Carol, are you seeing the same in some of the work that's keeping you busy?
Yeah, I would think so. I feel like what I'm thinking about is this it wasn't an official sync, but Dreams by Ocean Spray, or by, you know, have you seen the video of the guy on a skateboard drinking and Dreams? Like, I don't think Mick Fleetwood would have ever approved a Dreams being used by Ocean Spray had it been presented to him. But he can see, you know, it is obvious that that video has brought so much joy to people. And it's sort of, you know, it's the song that, and the joy on his face as he's skateboarding, right? But that song is familiar and it just makes us feel good. So I think for us, I mean, Nellie is at a brand that she's a music supervisor. We are all always believe that music can change the course or the tone or the intention of a spot. And, you know, as she says, it swings, but, you know, my joy is putting sound to film. You know, I feel like it is another character in that piece of in that work, whatever it is. So I will always advocate for the song being forefront.
Absolutely. Well, and to your point, we could have a whole separate 90-minute music biz seminar about the impact of TikTok. That's for sure. Rachel and Jeanette, before we open up to Q&A, how are you seeing the shifts and just overall, whether it's volume of music or the types of usages that your songs are being used for? Jeanette, if you want to start.
Sure. You know, I think the idea of nostalgia and feel good is coming back, and I do think that we're seeing more and more of that in ad campaigns and film and television as well. You know, we are seeing a lot of renewals from ad campaigns as well. So ads that campaigns that have ran for a long time are continuing to run. But in the Dreams example, it's a great example. We actually have Stevie Nicks who wrote that song, and that song is licensable, just so everybody knows. You know, but it just goes to show how something like that seems so organic, that is really organic, can then put the spotlight on a song that's a catalog song and introduce it to an entirely new audience of listeners. And kids, Gen Z, who probably didn't even know who Fleetwood Mac was, are now becoming fans. And I think it's, you know, one of the most streamed songs in the last week or so. So, you know, we're seeing a lot of that people are at home, they're paying attention, they're listening, and they're discovering old things new again, and they're discovering new artists as well. We're doing a lot of work for a lot of our independent, more up and coming artists also. So lots of placements for people like Little Sims and Nudes and Moses Sumney as well. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Awesome. Rachel, do you just represent the front line of Electra, or is catalog part of your role as well? I'm curious if you're seeing an increase in frontline versus catalog requests.
I do primarily frontline for Electra Music Group, but, you know, that doesn't mean to say that covers by our artists are not, you know, everybody, the general, from what we've been talking about, you know, music is this universal language. So the reason why I think that it's more upfront now in campaigns, or maybe we're seeing that more than exact messaging, is because that's what people need, and that's what we're all here to do. You know, I think, like you said, TikTok could be a whole other conversation because it has been ever present rapidly, very rapidly, and how to like negotiate and lay out everything for that and understand it. But, you know, since I don't do catalog, it's interesting to have one of our artists do a cover of a classic song, and that could be a way of introducing it to a whole new audience, as Jeanette was saying. You know, we have one of our artists just covered Dreams. Jeanette, just a heads up.
Send it on over.
But, you know, it's interesting, and it's really just trying to understand what our clients need, getting them the best music to help them for their campaigns, and just keep on driving the creative forward, whether it's in, you know, music's in the front or it's a bed.
To answer your question a little bit, Andrew, we just actually pulled that stat because I thought it was going to be an interesting one. We love looking at data at Cobalt, as you guys know. And we pulled our top 10 ads in the last 3 months. And of the top 10, it was literally 50-50, 50% catalog and 50% frontline in developing artists. Yeah.
That's great. It's great,
Yeah.
great news for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get to two super quick questions from the Q&A before we wrap. The first one is from Amrita Soon, and I think this is actually very interesting to know. Does it help if a song is held for release until a spot airs? Like, what do you guys recommend, especially the supervisors in the room? What do you recommend as far as whether a song needs to be brand new or can it already be out in the world to get used? Nelly, I'll let you take that one.
Happy to. I will say creative is what matters most. So the release date is helpful at times, for sure. It adds a level of excitement and also a level of co-marketing, which feels really exciting to be a part of. And we love to do that, especially for the artists when it's possible. But the creative is first. So if there's something that magically lands and it was released semi-recently versus unreleased, that's not what's going to dictate the decision. The decision needs to be with what really nails the messaging and also what nails the emotion behind the spot. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. But if you do have something unreleased that you're hoping to hold on to for sync, I mean, if there's no rush to release it, it is very wise to start reaching out for that, because there's a level of excitement that comes with something that's unreleased, because it opens up a new door of how do we do something a little bit bigger, especially when it's for an independent artist. I'm doing something very similar right now for our product Stadia for a developing act for that exact reason. And so if you are holding on to something that you're wanting to have purposed in a commercial or sync spot, then reach out. And if it doesn't align with your release plans, go ahead and release it, because it will pick up traction if it's the right creative either way.
Excellent. Carol, follow-up question for you, which is kind of a summary of several questions we have in the Q&A, which is, what's the best way for emerging artists to get on your radar? Should they work with a sync agency? Should they work with you, since you represent multiple parts of the pipeline? Like, how can an unsigned, just starting out artist get on your radar?
I mean, for us specifically, we do listen to, SoundCloud. Like, we scan SoundCloud, Spotify, whatever. I don't mind people reaching out to me directly. I get a lot of that. I get a lot of unsolicited. It's hard for, major labels or major publishing to accept. And there may be some legalities to that as well, just unsolicited material coming through for them. For us, it's great because we love compiling new artists, and we like to then use those artists to write songs specifically. We can give them a brief to write, or taking one of their tracks and being able to fit within a compromised budget, or this, as Nelly said, the creative leads. If this song is right and it's Bobby from Tulsa, she could land a huge sync, just unexpectedly. So I think it really is just about reaching out. I love that. I love the hustle. I love the passion. I love people just really making an effort to get their music out however they can, to whoever they can.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, I want to thank all of our amazing panelists, Carol, Rachel, Nelly, Jeanette, and of course, Ryan Tedder, who kicked things off. And thank you to all of you who tuned in today and for all the fantastic questions. So thanks everyone for joining, and stick around for more amazing programming from the Music Biz Brand Summit later this month, every Thursday.